Imagine a muscle, just any muscle in your body stretching 2.5 times its normal resting length.
Right. So 250%.
Yeah, 150%.
Yeah.
I mean, for a professional athlete, a stretch of that magnitude is, it's a catastrophic career-ending injury.
Oh, absolutely. It's an emergency.
Right. But for millions of women around the world, it's just called, well, childbirth.
Yeah.
And the intense biomechanical aftermath of that is somehow it's just completely swept under the rug.
It really is. It highlights this this fascinating double standard in how we view physical trauma. Like, we treat sports injuries with immediate, rigorous rehabilitation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we enter the deeply misunderstood world of women's pelvic health, major structural changes are just, they're often brushed off as just a normal part of aging or motherhood.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. We're here to welcome you, the listener, and really cut through the heavy stigma and, honestly, the very loud marketing noise surrounding a topic that affects thousands of women.
Yeah, so many.
But it rarely makes it into everyday conversation, and that is vaginal laxity. Specifically, we are pulling apart one central mystery today. Like, many women feel a sense of looseness, a loss of tone, or reduced support. But is that a muscle problem? Or is it a tissue problem or a structural architectural issue? Basically, can a wide genital hiatus, the actual anatomical opening in the pelvic floor, directly contribute to these laxity symptoms?
And to get to the bottom of this, we are synthesizing a really robust stack of sources today. I mean, we're looking at data from the European Journal of Medical and Health Sciences. We've got clinical FAQs from leading women's health clinics, official treatment guidelines from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
Which is a huge authority.
Exactly. And even sports medicine journals that focus on female rugby players. And, the consensus across all these fields is that for decades, patients have been bringing these very real symptoms to their providers, only to be dismissed.
Yeah, or handed some, one-size-fits-all solution that just completely ignores their actual underlying anatomy.
Precisely.
So if you're listening to this and you've ever mentioned feeling a loss of support to a doctor, only to be told, everything looks fine down there, well, this is where you finally get some validation.
Yes.
Because before we can even answer if a widened genital hiatus causes laxity, we have to define what laxity actually is.
Right, because the medical establishment views this issue very, very differently than the general public does.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the difference?
Well, the diagnostic landscape here it's incredibly murky. What stands out immediately in the literature is that vaginal laxity is not a definitive diagnosis you can just pinpoint on an X-ray or an ultrasound.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is an entirely subjective, patient-reported sensation.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of looseness, maybe a lack of physical friction during intimacy, or even air trapping, which some clinics refer to as vaginal wind.
Wow. Okay.
But the point is, you cannot measure a feeling with a ruler.
Right, so it's heavily reliant on the patient's own, physical awareness of their body.
Exactly. Now, you have to contrast that subjective feeling with pelvic organ prolapse, which is commonly known as POP.
Right, POP.
Yeah, prolapse is a highly objective, measurable anatomical descent. It's when the pelvic organs, so like the bladder, the uterus, or the rectum, physically drop down into or even bulge outside of the vaginal canal.
Oh, wow.
And a doctor can measure that drop in actual millimeters.
Okay, I want to make sure we're separating these two concepts clearly for everyone listening.
Mm-hmm.
So laxity is the feeling of instability, but prolapse is a physical structural drop.
Yes, that's it.
Like, I'm picturing a massive suspension bridge. Laxity is that terrifying feeling when you're driving over the bridge and it's swaying too much in the wind.
Right.
It feels unstable, it feels loose, it just doesn't feel secure. But prolapse is the actual steel cable snapping and the bridge physically dropping down toward the water.
That analogy that captures the mechanics perfectly, because you can experience the swaying without the collapse. And sometimes, surprisingly, you can have the collapse without the swaying.
Wait, really? You can have a prolapse without feeling loose?
Yeah. Research published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine found no strict correlation between the physical, clinical findings of a prolapse and the subjective feeling of laxity.
That's wild.
Right. A patient might have a measurable prolapse and not report feeling loose at all. Conversely, a patient might feel incredible laxity, just a profound loss of tone, but have organs that are perfectly suspended in place.
Which totally explains why a doctor might look, see no prolapse, and tell the patient she's fine.
Exactly.
Even though she feels like the bridge is swaying wildly. But if we want to understand how the swaying and the structural drop do overlap, We need to look at the foundation of that bridge.
Yes, the anatomy.
Right. So let's get into it. If the pelvic floor is a hammock of muscles supporting your pelvic organs, what exactly is the genital hiatus?
Okay, so imagine that muscular hammock spanning the entire bottom of your pelvis. In females, that hammock cannot be a solid, continuous sheet of muscle.
Right, obviously.
It has to have an opening to allow the urethra and the vagina to pass through. That opening is the genital hiatus. It's this V-shaped gap within the levator antemuscle group, specifically bordered by a U-shaped muscle called the puborectalis.
Okay, puborectalis.
Yeah, just think of it as the anatomical doorway out of the pelvis.
Okay, so we have this natural muscular doorway. Let's look at the actual math of this hiatus, because our sources from the European Journal get very, very specific about what happens when this doorway gets too wide.
They do. And the clinical measurements are where the risk becomes tangible. Doctors use a standardized system called the POPQ to measure pelvic support.
POPQ, okay.
In the system, they measure the genital hiatus from the middle of the external urethral opening to the back of the vaginal opening. And a healthy, supportive genital hiatus is generally under 5 centimeters.
It's under 5 centimeters. And there's another measurement right below that, right? The perineal body.
Yes.
That's the physical space from the bottom of the genital hiatus down to the anus. Our sources state that a normal, supportive perineal body should be over 3 centimeters long.
That's correct.
So under 5 centimeters for the opening, over 3 centimeters for the supportive space below it. But what happens when a patient's anatomy crosses those thresholds?
Well, the consequences are actually severe. The European Journal of Medical and Health Sciences tracked these exact measurements in relation to severe prolapse. And they discovered that if a woman's genital hiatus widens to 5 centimeters or more, and simultaneously her perineal body shortens to 3 centimeters or less, her risk of stage 3 or stage 4 uterine prolapse jumps fourfold.
A 400% increase.
Yes.
In the risk of your uterus literally dropping out of its normal anatomical position. I mean, that is a massive leap in risk.
It really is. And in clinical terms, this pathological widening is called hiatal ballooning.
Ballooning.
Yeah. The muscular opening simply becomes too expansive to support the heavy organ sitting above it.
Let me try to visualize this structurally.
Nah.
It's like a buttonhole on a thick winter coat.
Okay, I like that.
If you pull at it constantly, the buttonhole stretches out and gets wider. So that's the hiatal ballooning. And as that hole stretches, the actual fabric between the buttonhole and the edge of the coat gets frayed and thinner. That's the shortening perineal body.
Right.
And eventually the hole is so wide and the border is so thin that the heavy button just slips right through.
The structural integrity is entirely compromised. And this brings us back to our central question, right? When that hiatus balloons, when the opening is structurally too wide, women very frequently report that subjective feeling of laxity.
Wow, they
feel a dragging sensation, a lack of support, or reduced friction. It is a very real anatomical change triggering that subjective sensation.
But what is pushing women past that 5 centimeter limit? Like, how does a thick, supportive muscle opening just permanently balloon like that?
Well, the primary biomechanical driver is vaginal childbirth. During a vaginal delivery, the baby's head has to pass directly through that V-shaped doorway we talked about.
Right.
And to allow a human skull to pass through, the levator antemuscle, the muscle forming the borders of the hiatus, has to stretch up to 250% of its original length.
Which brings us back to that staggering statistic from the beginning of the show. And I really want to pause and contextualize this for you, the listener. If I take a resistance band at the gym, right?
Yeah.
And I stretch it 250%, I am risking it snapping right in my face.
Yeah.
So what is the normal physiological limit for a human skeletal muscle?
The maximum stretch almost any skeletal muscle in the human body can endure before the fibers physically tear and sustain injury is 150%.
Wait, so the pelvic floor during childbirth is routinely pushed 100% past the threshold where any other muscle in your body would suffer a severe tear.
Exactly. It is arguably the largest potential hernia portal in the human body, and it undergoes a stretch that literally defies standard biomechanics.
It's mind-blowing.
It is. And while the female body has evolved to accommodate this incredible event, it frequently results in significant trauma.
Wow.
We aren't just talking about microtrauma, tiny microscopic tears in the muscle fibers.
Right.
We are talking about macrotrauma. Studies show up to 41% of women experience actual muscle avulsion during a vaginal birth.
Avulsion, what does that mean?
Avulsion means the levator ani muscle is literally torn completely off its insertion point on the pubic bone.
Ripped right off the bone.
Yes.
And if the muscle that forms the border of the genital hiatus is torn away, or even just permanently overstretched, that doorway can't close back up.
No, it can't.
A hiatus stays wide, it balloons.
The resting tone is lost. The muscles cannot physically pull the gap shut, the organs lose their shelf of support, and the patient feels a profound, lingering sense of looseness. So in this scenario, you have a highly objective anatomical injury, a torn or overstretched muscle causing the subjective symptom of laxity.
Okay, but wait. If laxity can be caused by a muscle tearing off the bone or stretching to 250% during childbirth, what about women who haven't had that experience?
Yeah, right.
Because I was looking at the clinical FAQs from the women's health centers and our source stack, and they treat women who've exclusively had C-sections or who have never been pregnant at all. Yet these women are coming in reporting the exact same intense feelings of vaginal laxity later in life. So if the muscles didn't tear and the genital hiatus didn't balloon, what on earth is causing this feeling of looseness?
This shifts our focus entirely, and it introduces a totally different physiological mechanism. If it is not a muscle issue, it is a tissue issue.
Okay, a tissue issue.
Specifically, we have to look at the massive cellular shifts that happen during menopause. In the medical community, this is officially diagnosed as GSM, or genitourinary syndrome of menopause.
Because the vagina isn't just a muscular hammock, right? It's a canal lined with intricate tissue.
Exactly. To understand GSM, we have to look at the architecture of the vaginal wall. It consists of three primary layers: the mucosa, the muscularis, and the adventitia.
Whoa, hold on. Mucosa, adventitia, epithelial cells? Let's visualize this a bit more practically for the listener.
Fair enough.
If the vaginal canal is a tunnel, are we talking about the actual bricks, the mortar holding it together, or the paint on the walls?
Let's use the tunnel. That's good. The mucosa is the paint and the protective sealant on the walls.
Okay, the paint.
And in a healthy premenopausal state, the hormone estrogen acts as the ultimate biological manager. Estrogen keeps that sealant thick and moist because estrogen fuels glycogen, and glycogen feeds the healthy bacteria.
The lactobacilli.
Exactly. Which keeps the environment perfectly acidic, warding off infections. But beneath that sealant is the connective tissue, the mortar.
Okay.
Estrogen stimulates cells called fibroblasts in the mortar to constantly produce fresh collagen and elastin fibers, keeping the tunnel flexible and resilient.
So estrogen's basically the master architect keeping everything thick, stretchy, and well lubricated.
Exactly the right way to think about it. But when menopause arrives and estrogen levels plummet, the architect walks off the job. That inner layer, the mucosa or the paint, becomes incredibly thin. The plump superficial epithelial cells drop to less than 10% of their normal volume.
10%.
Yeah, and without those cells, the glycogen disappears. Without glycogen, the healthy bacteria starve, causing the pH to rise and the environment to become dry and fragile.
Which sounds incredibly uncomfortable.
It is, and beneath that, in the mortar, the fibroblasts go dormant. They stop making fresh collagen. The existing collagen fibers fuse together into stiff bundles, and the elastin just fragments.
So to go back to our hammock analogy from earlier, it's not that the hammock's ropes, the muscles are stretched out or torn from childbirth. It's that the fabric of the hammock itself has dried out, become brittle, and lost its natural bounds.
Exactly. The tissue has fundamentally changed character. Because it is thinner, drier, and far less elastic, women describe feeling less physical grip or responsiveness during intimacy. The loss of that thick, folded mucosal layer creates a very real sensation of laxity, even if their genital hiatus is perfectly normal, measuring beautifully under 5 centimeters, and they have absolutely zero organ prolapse.
That is such a vital, empowering distinction for you listening right now. Like, you can feel loose because a muscle tore off your pubic bone a decade ago during delivery, or you can feel loose because your collagen production simply shut down during menopause last year.
2 entirely different root causes.
Exactly. Located in different bodily systems resulting in the exact same subjective symptom. Which brings up a glaring problem. How on earth is a doctor supposed to treat this? Because all I see online, on social media, on billboards, are ads for vaginal rejuvenation.
Oh, yes.
Lasers, radiofrequency devices, energy wands promising to tighten everything up and cure all your symptoms in 20 minutes. Can a laser fix a torn muscle?
No. If we look at the official regulatory guidelines in our sources, the medical consensus is a resounding message of caution. According to the UK's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, the NICE guidelines, as well as safety communications from the US FDA, these energy devices are considered investigational.
Investigational, meaning the companies haven't actually proven to the scientific community that they are safe or effective for this specific issue.
Right, they're absolutely not standard care. The clinical evidence simply isn't there to support the sweeping marketing claims. In fact, the FDA has issued explicit warnings about the risks of severe burns, scarring, and persistent pain from these thermal devices.
So they could actually make things worse.
Much worse. And the global pushback is growing. In 2025, Australia's medical regulator actually canceled all approvals for these cosmetic vaginal rejuvenation devices.
Well, all of them.
Yep. After a thorough review, they determined the physical risks outweighed the unproven anecdotal benefits.
So if a woman has a genital hiatus that has ballooned to 6 centimeters because her levator ani muscle physically tore off the bone, paying thousands of dollars for a laser treatment isn't going to fix her architecture.
No, you cannot laser a torn muscle back onto a bone. If a clinician doesn't determine why a patient is experiencing laxity, any treatment they offer is just a shot in the dark. Treatment must be meticulously matched to the cause.
Okay, so what is the real treatment then?
If the issue is muscular, meaning a widened genital hiatus, or an early-stage prolapse risk the absolute first line, evidence-based treatment is pelvic floor muscle training.
Okay, I have to jump in here because I think a lot of people immediately roll their eyes when they hear pelvic floor training or Kegels.
I know.
It feels like the advice you get on a checkout aisle magazine, right? Like, just do 100 Kegels at stoplights while you commute.
Yeah.
It always sounded a bit ridiculous to me. But the sports science and physical therapy sources we have actually dive into the biomechanics of why that magazine advice is completely useless.
It really is useless. And here's why. The pelvic floor is a highly complex muscle group made up of two distinct types of fibers. Approximately 70% of the pelvic floor consists of slow-twitch muscle fibers, and the remaining 30% are fast-twitch fibers.
Slow twitch being the marathon runners, endurance fibers meant for holding things up all day, and fast twitch being the sprinters, meant for sudden, forceful reactions like when you sneeze, cough, or jump.
Exactly. So if you are just doing 100 fast, rapid-fire Kegels at a stoplight, you are solely training the 30% of the muscle responsible for quick reflexes.
Oh, I see.
You are completely ignoring the 70% slow-twitch fibers that actually provide the constant baseline resting tone needed to narrow the genital hiatus and support the pelvic organs against gravity all day long.
So what is the scientifically correct prescription for a ballooning hiatus? Like, how do you actually train it?
The physical therapy guidelines mandate targeted exercises for both fiber types. To train the slow twitch fibers, you need holds. You contract the pelvic floor, focusing on pulling up and in, not pushing out, and hold that contraction for a count of 5 to 10 seconds while breathing normally.
Okay, 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah, this builds endurance and resting tone. Then, to train the fast twitch fibers, you incorporate flicks, which are quick, strong, 3-second contractions.
Oh, flick.
Doing this consistently, ideally under the guidance of a specialized pelvic floor physical therapist, actually increases the muscle bulk. It actively narrows that anatomical doorway, reducing the hiatus and dramatically improving the feeling of laxity.
Okay, that makes so much sense. But what if your laxity is tissue-driven? What if you're navigating menopause, your muscles are incredibly strong, but the GSM, that severe drop in estrogen we talked about, has made the mucosal tissue thin, dry, and brittle?
Right.
Doing 10-second holds isn't going to magically generate collagen.
No, Kegels will do absolutely nothing to fix genitourinary syndrome of menopause. If the subjective sensation of laxity is driven by the cellular tissue changes of menopause, the gold standard treatment is local vaginal estrogen.
And to clarify, local meaning a cream, a small tablet, or maybe a flexible ring placed directly into the vagina, rather than swallowing a systemic hormone pill that affects your whole body.
Right, exactly. Local estrogen bypasses the systemic bloodstream. It is applied directly to the affected tissue where it goes straight to work acting on those exact mucosal cells we discussed earlier.
The paint and the mortar.
Yes. It wakes up the dormant fibroblasts. It tells them to start producing collagen and elastin again. It thickens the epithelial layer, normalizes the acidic pH, and promotes natural lubrication.
That's incredible.
It doesn't mechanically tighten the muscle, but by restoring the plumpness, hydration, and health of the tissue, it resolves the subjective sensation of laxity for a vast majority of women. Once the tissue is resilient and intimacy is comfortable again, the worry about looseness often fades completely.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We started out talking about a feeling vaginal laxity, a symptom that is incredibly subjective, often hard to bring up with the doctor, and, frankly, heavily preyed upon by expensive cosmetic marketing.
Unfairly preyed upon.
Unfairly, yes.
Okay.
But what we've unpacked today is that this subjective feeling has very objective biological root causes.
Mm-hmm.
It might be an architectural issue, a genital hiatus that is ballooned past that 5-centimeter threshold because of the immense 250% stretch of childbirth.
Right.
Or it might be a tissue issue, the cellular drought caused by the loss of estrogen during menopause.
Right.
Pinpointing exactly which one is happening in your body is the very first step to getting out of the diagnostic muddy waters, finding the right targeted treatment, and feeling confident and supported again.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one final thought from our sports science sources that absolutely demands your attention, because it perfectly frames how we need to shift our perspective on this entire topic.
Yes, and it's a powerful one. We established earlier that the pelvic floor muscles undergo a 250% stretch during a vaginal delivery, pushing far past the 150% injury threshold of any other skeletal muscle in the human body.
Right. The snapping point.
Exactly. So think about the world of professional sports. If an elite rugby player or a professional footballer suffered a muscle tear or an avulsion of that magnitude in their hamstring or their quadricep,
Oh, the medical response would be instantaneous.
instantaneous. Their rehabilitation would be intense, heavily funded, strictly monitored by a dedicated team of physical therapists, and considered absolutely central to their return to play.
They would never be casually told to just do a few exercises at a stoplight and sent home.
Never. Yet when postpartum women who have just endured this massive biomechanical trauma return to high-impact sports, running, or heavy lifting, the rehabilitation of their pelvic floor is still heavily overlooked, minimized, or entirely ignored by the mainstream sports medicine community.
It's so frustrating.
We treat an ACL tear like a localized medical emergency requiring a year of dedicated supervised rehab, but we treat a 250% levator anti-stretch or a complete muscle avulsion as just an expected and normal part of motherhood.
Yeah.
It highlights a massive systemic gap in how we value, study, and rehabilitate the female body. Your pelvic floor isn't a mysterious black box. It is an intricate, essential, load-bearing structure. It deserves the exact same respect, the exact same precise clinical diagnosis, and the exact same rigorous rehabilitation as any elite athlete's injury.